You may be wondering, what is a housing start and how does that affect my purchasing ability as a new buyer? So, in this article today, I'm going to go into that exact question. And in this article by stories.com, we look at the data showing us the recent numbers in May's housing starts, comparing that to the previous months, and gives us a highlight of where housing supply is going in the future. So first, let me define what a housing start is. Well, a housing start, it's an economic indicator in real estate that tells us how many new residential construction projects have actually officially begun. And we typically count this as when the foundation has been laid. Now in Canada, this data is tracked monthly by Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. And why does this information matter? When you have high housing starts, typically builders feel confident about the demand and the economy, which incentivizes them to continue building going forward. When you have low housing starts, builders may start pulling back due to the uncertainty, high borrowing costs, or lower demand. Because in order for these projects to move forward, they need to have at least 70% of the units sold as a pre-construction in order for them to get the loan to continue on the project. When it comes to future supply, housing starts suggest more inventory will come into the market in the next 12 to 36 months, while a low start could tighten future supply and then put upward pressure on home prices. All right, so let's take a look at this article by stories.com regarding housing starts in May. Headline: Canadian housing starts have been flat in May at its lowest level since 2009 in Ontario. We had a surge 30% month over month in April, and the seasonally adjusted annual rate of housing starts remained more or less flat in May as the markets in Ontario, BC continued to weaken. After surging 30% month over month in April, the seasonally adjusted annual rate of housing starts remained more or less flat between April and May, with a 0.2% drop, as home building and markets in Ontario and BC continue to weaken. Now, in the long-term 6-month trend in housing starts also remained relatively flat in May, which posed a 0.8% increase, hovering around 243,407 units, while actual housing starts grew 9% year over year, from 21,814 units last May to 23,745. So as pointed out in analysis from Desjardins economist Kerry Norman last month, April's high activity was an outlier compared to the previous 4 months, and he spoke more on the natural fluctuations of the multi-unit starts and their reporting dates rather than an indication of a turnaround in the sector. So you can see here in this graph where it tracks the number of housing that started their projects. The lowest in May of 2023 being under 200,000 homes, then peaking at over 275. This is where we talk about April being an outlier, going from March to April. You see in March hovering around 210,000 to then jumping around 279,000 housing starts. That's a dramatic increase. And the following month after, in May, it pretty much remained flat. And that's basically what it's talking about. And they say the growth in actual starts activity in May was once again driven by increase in single detached homes and purpose-built rentals in Quebec and the Prairie provinces. And by contrast, we had a weak condominium market conditions in Toronto and Vancouver, which had contributions to significant declines in overall housing starts in these regions, in line with the current analysis of the market. When you look at larger cities, the natural growth was fueled by 11% year-over-year increase in actual housing starts in Montreal, and pulled down by 10% month-over-month decrease in Vancouver, 22% year-over-year decrease in Toronto starts, both driven by lower multi-unit starts. And in the recent CMHC analysis, they look at the current state of Toronto and Vancouver's condominium markets, highlighting plummeting sales, sliding prices, and ballooning inventory. And these are all factors that have led to increased project cancellations and reduced construction activity. Basically, for an overview, all condo sales, including resale, new pre-construction units, they all fell 75% in Toronto and 37% in Vancouver between 2022, mid-2022, and end of Q1 2025. And these slow sales, paired with record high condo apartment completions in 2024, led to a steady inventory growth, which accumulated in the current 58 months of inventory in Toronto and price dropping 13.4% in Toronto and 2.7% in Vancouver between Q1 of 2022 and 2025. If you look at the construction front, the result have been a 5 and 10-fold increase in the number of condo projects cancellations compared to 2022 in Toronto and Vancouver. 5 and 10-fold increase, that's significant. And a consistent downtrend in multi-unit starts in the two major cities. Now, Monday's national housing starts data comes soon after the release of Financial Accountability Office. And this analyzes the number of economic indicators such as employment and inflation, but also home sales and housing starts for the first quarter of 2025. Findings from the report point to continued strain in the province's economy, with housing starts being no exception. And according to the report, high construction costs and weak sales as households continue to face housing affordability challenges have pushed provincial housing starts down 20.2% to 12,700 compared to the 15,900 units started in 2024 Q4, marking the lowest level of housing starts since 2009. And remember, these numbers refer to Ontario. So if you're a buyer, the latest housing starts data is a mixed signal. So while national numbers show some resilience, the decline in the new condo construction in major markets like Toronto and Vancouver suggests future inventory may tighten, especially for high-rise units. Now, this could mean less choice and upward price pressures down the line. Now, you're not going to see this right away. Over the next course of however many years, you're going to start to see supply dwindle if we don't continue to build new houses as our population continues to grow. Now, on the flip side, strong growth in housing starts across the prairies in Quebec show that affordability and supply may actually improve in those regions. But if you're buying the GTA, it may be wise to act sooner rather than later, especially if you're buying a condo, because new supply will not be keeping up and demand will likely catch up in the near future. Because right now you're looking at things at massive discounts for condos. A lot of times you're going to be able to find the condos you actually like in the locations you want to live in. If we wait a couple more years down the road and we find that there's less condos being built, eventually we will get to a balance and there will be more competition when there becomes more demand and less supply. So definitely keep that in mind. So hopefully that video was useful for you guys. Leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and message me if you have any questions related to this topic. Until then, talk to you guys soon. Cheers.